The truth about personality disorders for survivors. What if I told you that personality disorders aren't really what you've been led to believe? They're not just labels, they're not just excuses, and they're not a catch all explanation for every heartbreak or manipulative ex. In fact, and this is crucial, they are rare. The best available data tells us that full blown narcissistic personality disorder affects only about 1.7% of the population. That's not many. Most people you meet, even the ones who hurt you, betray you, lie, or cheat, are not pathologically disordered. They're just messy, immature, wounded, reactive, selfish, or emotionally unavailable. So, what makes a personality disorder different? A personality disorder is not just bad behavior, it's not just cruelty or coldness. It's a structural collapse of the self, formed early in life, rooted in trauma, sealed in the nervous system, and repeated in every single relationship. It's not about a single event, it's about a failed developmental process. In MPIT, we see that process not just from the perspective of the person with the disorder, but from the other side, the survivor who gets trapped inside their structure. Because personality disorders don't exist in isolation, they pull others into their orbit. And here's what actually happens. In early life, the child who becomes a narcissist, a borderline, or maybe even an antisocial personality type experiences a deep failure of affective attunement. They don't learn how to regulate their feelings. They don't develop a coherent self. Instead, they survive by splitting, projecting, idealizing, withdrawing, or controlling others. That fragmented inner world becomes their personality. And later, when you, the survivor, meet someone like this, you don't see pathology, you see intensity, you see connection, you see someone who needs you. But what you're actually seeing in regards to a narcissistic person or a borderline person is a shared fantasy, an externalized structure built to compensate for what they're missing internally. You become their regulator, and slowly, without realizing it, you disappear. This is the collapse that MPIT describes, not in them, but in you. The collapse of authorship, the internalization of their structure, the loss of self. This isn't codependency, it is mirrored psychic inversion. And let's be clear, most people don't end up here. Most people have relationships that go wrong, learn something from it, and move on. But survivors of disordered relationships, they don't just get hurt, they vanish. They stop being able to live. They spiral into guilt, shame, confusion, chronic dysregulation, and identity loss. They lose their ability to process reality. They become stuck in looping fantasies, symbolic attachments, and a sense of unreality that doesn't lift, not for days, weeks, months, or even years. These are not just bad breakups, these are symbolic collapses. And that's why we say it's not about whether they were disordered, it's about whether you collapsed. Because only a certain kind of structure, a pathological one, can induce inversion in another person. That's the litmus test. Not whether they cheated, not whether they ghosted, but whether you lost access to your own self. Whether your nervous system hasn't calmed down since. Whether you feel like you're still living in them. That's the mark of a personality disordered relationship. And yes, it's rare, but when it happens, it changes everything. MPIT exists to give survivors a map out of this collapse. Because what we've seen is that recovery is not linear and it's not fast. It's not just about no contact. It's not just about trauma healing, it's about structural reassembly. Because what was broken wasn't just your heart, it was your inner architecture. The real truth: most people you meet will not be disordered. Most abusive relationships are not psychopathic or narcissistic, they're just immature. But for the ones that are disordered, the damage is real and the collapse is total. And so the survivors of those relationships, they often don't tell anyone. They don't lash out. They're not always posting online. They disappear. They are the ones who end up in bed, in collapse, in silence for years. Not because they're weak, but because they carried a whole other's psyche inside them. And when it turned on them, they couldn't get it out. That's why MPIT doesn't teach survivors just how to spot red flags. It teaches them how to reclaim authorship. Because healing isn't just surviving abuse, it's learning how to never carry someone else's structure again. So, no, most people are not narcissists. Most people are not pathologically disordered. But when you meet someone who is, and you carry their word inside you, it can destroy you. Now you know why. Peace out.